Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and this is episode 3. Today I've got mkee, FinTech CEO, co-founder, going to hang out with us. He's heavily involved in the startup community here in northeastern Wisconsin, and he is going to tell us what not to do. Hold tight. Here we go. All right, we're live. Hey, I'm here with mkee. We are at Copper State Brewing Company on Broadway in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we're drinking some drinks. Matthew, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking an Ivory Mocha.
And I've got a Breve Latte. I went a little frou-frou today, which is kind of fun. Well, awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. This is very cool.
Yeah, you and I met, it was late last summer or early fall?
Yeah, it's probably late, but November sometime.
Well, yeah, and just a blast. You're heavily involved in the startup community here. You yourself have been a startup, right? CEO of a FinTech company. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but I want you just to kind of talk about a little bit about who you are, a bit about what you do, and we'll get into then a little bit about why you do it. So
sure,
talk to us.
So I actually am not originally from Green Bay. I actually grew up in the Chicagoland area. And spent my life in Chicago, Lisle, and then a far west suburbs of Chicagoland called Yorkville, which is on the edge of cornfields. So I did grow up in kind of farm country, which is kind of crazy. But I went to school at a school south of Chicago called Olivet Nazarene University. I studied international business and Spanish and had a great opportunity there. I studied abroad several times.
Are you still pretty fluent in Spanish?
I am fluent in Spanish.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my wife actually. So we actually attended the same school. So she was a year ahead of me. I graduated in 2011. She graduated in a year before me in 2010. So she's originally from Alloway, and so that's the eventual connection to Green Bay. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Not that it's not a great place, but I just wouldn't know the greatness existed. How about that, right? One of my passions, honestly, is. Two things, I guess, from a personal standpoint, music and the Spanish language. Yeah. So I actually studied piano when I was young, played that for 12 years.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Then started learning guitar, kind of self-taught myself on guitar. Interned in high school, had a garage band, and I'm still waiting. I kind of joke around about this, but I'm still kind of waiting for that world tour to start. We had such high aspirations, but as come out, sometimes high school dreams have to die in high school, so that just stayed there. But
what style were you guys?
We were rock,
Okay.
So rock, and I was the lead singer, even though I was only the lead singer because I was kind of like the best of everybody else, which wasn't saying much. Let's put it that way, right? But
what kind of rock? Like, who are some of your influences?
So we had a lot of the bands we were influenced by were Christian bands, so we're talking about like DC Talk, Newsboys, right?
Yeah.
So we had actually wrote a lot of songs. I was actually pretty prolific back in the day.
Sweet.
Now they were not. They're probably more cringeworthy than they were able to be released, but I did a lot of that. It was fun. It was really fun. So
something to definitely be proud of. You put energy into it, and interesting on how that can even set a stage and. It makes sense. That's kind of an entrepreneurial endeavor in and of itself, right?
For sure.
From having a product, marketing it, getting out performing, you have a fan base or customers, and a lot that can go into it, and it's a lot of fun.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's kind of made me. It's kind of funny because it's obviously music is a very creative process, and so being able to express. My creativity in that way was really, really, really fun, right? Not only empowering, but also really, really fun, and also like a song itself is essentially like a product, right? Like it's just like a mini product, and like Even from the intro of the song, you decide whether or not you're going to be continuing to listen to that song or not, right? So music has a lot of influences in the kind of way that sometimes I think about business and startups and stuff. But one of my other passions was Spanish. So I had a really, really solid Spanish education in high school. I was able to travel to Puerto Rico once, and I ended up having a bilingual job at McDonald's as a manager in high school. So I was there for 3 years. I ended up taking a year off between high school and college, figure out what I wanted to do, and basically spoke Spanish fluently to the Spanish-speaking employees that were there, and that really set up my focus was on college, which when I studied international business and Spanish just made a lot of sense, right? And so throughout college, I had the opportunity to study abroad twice, once in Europe, once in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica in particular, I studied and lived with host families in Costa Rica. It was very fun, very cool. But making a long story short, getting out of school, my wife and I got married 2011, and my first job was a job out of college at JP Morgan Chase, which was actually a bilingual job. So I was there for about 3 years, basically speaking Spanish on a daily basis, selling investment products to all individuals, high net worth individuals, but I also manage a Spanish-speaking book of business too. So it's just kind of neat to see some of the skills kind of develop that I've developed in high school, also in college, also play out in my professional life as well.
Oh yeah, and huge. I've always heard it said that like having a second language or being able to be bilingual can be a huge advantage in the marketplace, especially coming out of college, a way to separate yourself.
That was one of the reasons I got the job that I did. Actually, they were looking for somebody bilingual, and it was I stood out. Yeah. So it was a perfect job for me right out of school.
Awesome. So married, any kids?
Yeah, we have a 1.5-year-old son named Josiah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Great name.
Yeah.
Probably fun to see him get old, grow old. We obviously have a few kiddos at our house too. And do you see Josiah taking on any like musical traits or kind of anything interesting?
Yeah.
What do you see him?
So he loves sitting with me when I play the piano. He loves my guitar.
Yeah.
What he loves about he actually doesn't. He likes to play my guitar, but what he really likes is taking my guitar pick and putting it in the sound hole, and then having me flip over the guitar and having me shake out the pick. He just found so much joy in that it's kind of really funny. So whenever I come back from home from work, a lot of times he goes over to the closet where the guitar is and he goes tar. And so yeah, we have a good time together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our oldest are 3 and 2. Mm-hmm. And I'll let them take a pick and like let them try to strum down, facing the guitar and I'm holding it, that type of thing. And it's amazing. I think sometimes we underestimate young children's abilities to perceive and to learn all kind of stuff.
Yep.
I think there's some things that you can't really measure or quantify necessarily, but we kind of take the perspective of like, well, hey, let's just expose them to things.
Yeah.
And see what they drink in and see what peaks and kind of develops. And
yep.
I think so much of that is cultivating not so much the child, although that's a part of it, but also the environment the child is in.
Yep.
So that's really neat to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So tell me a bit about what it is that you do. You obviously don't work for JP Morgan anymore. And you had a pretty big stint between what you do now and that. So you want to share a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was at JP Morgan for several years, and this was living in the Chicagoland area, and transitioned out of JP Morgan, and kind of two things happened. So I ended up transitioning out, going back to business school, got an MBA, and then I eventually added a second master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation through Indiana University. Concurrent to that, I actually joined up with my father, and we started a financial technology company.
Cool.
So he had been in the bond market for about 20 years, and the bond market is certainly not sexy by any stretch of the imagination, but believe it or not, the bond market is actually twice as large as the stock market. Most people don't know that. It's actually very technologically archaic. So we had noticed the problem across different asset managers, and it's just the very rudimentary decision-making process was very inefficient. So we developed a patent-pending algorithm to solve that problem and scoped out the problem, vetted it out, get early customer validation, what we call the customer discovery process. Then we built out the algorithm, and then we built out a web product. That was kind of, believe it or not, as I'm recounting the story, it takes like 20 seconds to share, but that was basically about 2 to 3 years, as you would imagine, because all these things take time. Throughout the entire time, obviously, looking to raise capital, so pitching in different angel investor groups, pitching to different venture capitalists, flying across the country, going to New York, Silicon Valley, pitching to investors there.
And you had no experience doing that? Or had
Absolutely not, yeah.
Did your dad have experience doing that?
Nope.
So brand new.
So no, both of us were very, I would say, very new when it came to putting that together. And to be honest with you, in that process, maybe the failure piece will come up later. I'm not sure if you want me to address it now or if you want to kind of we can work on that later. But
hold on to it later.
We'll circle back to it.
Cool, perfect.
Because there's a lot of things that I've learned throughout that process. But ended up 2018 raising venture capital from a Fortune 500 company, which is named FIS, and they're actually the largest financial technology company in the world. So the fact that FIS invested in us is obviously a huge validation point for what we were doing, what we were looking to bring to the market. So that was mid-2018.
Encouraging, nonetheless.
Yeah, very encouraging, honestly. Especially, as you'd imagine, that's one of those milestones where you're kind of like, okay, this is for real. You know what I'm saying? Not that it wasn't for real before, because we were very invested, but like as an entrepreneur, you look for those what I would call kind of risk-determining milestones, and the fact that FIS had invested in us and the credibility they had in the market was a huge just boost of validation for what we were doing, right?
Yeah.
So that was mid-2018, and then brought on a couple individuals from our team, one locally, project manager, technical individual, and then a former Vanguard employee, portfolio manager who had managed several $100 billion in bonds. And then that kind of, early last year, so early 2019, ended up transitioning. So made that company part-time, meaning the company that we were working on, Upper Room Technology. And I had this opportunity at the Chamber come up, and so that's kind of, here I am. That's kind of why I'm here right now.
So you're still CEO of the FinTech company, but tell me a little bit about what you're doing also today with the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah. So basically, to kind of set the stage, the Chamber was looking to hire somebody who's working in the startups and innovation space. And the vision was there. And when I, met my boss, my now boss, but at the time, we connected in April 2019, and it was kind of like right time, right place, right person, I suppose. And they were really the prompt was this. It was, Title Tech's coming online, and there's a lot of work that we can do in the startup ecosystem. And they were looking to have me come on board to help shape that from a startups and tech perspective. And so I'm kind of like the execution piece of that vision, right? And really what I do is to say it's, if you want to say it succinctly, I guess I'll say it and then I'll kind of nuance it. But what I do is I deliver capital, connections, and customers to local startups. My company went through a startup accelerator called G-Beta, which means I have a lot of angel and venture capital connections across the Midwest. So I've been able to make a lot of connections for startups in that vein, which has been very helpful. Connections, we've been able to connect startups with technical individuals looking to get into a startup, with business-minded individuals looking to get into a startup, people on the sidelines looking to get into the startup community. And we've been kind of developing out the infrastructure to do that. And the third piece is customers. So we've been able to connect local startups with local corporations that are really need to be connected because they're such a good fit strategically. We've been successful in that, and we've even created one particular instance. We actually created a joint venture between the startup and a joint venture was created between this corporation and the startup because of the kind of the catalyst that they created. They ended up creating a new product that's now will be eventually taken to market.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So you've not only built your own company, but you're helping others to build.
Yep.
Tell me why. Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, no. So the reason why I do this, and I am doing this, is because, to be honest with you, when we think about Green Bay and more broadly Northeast Wisconsin, I suppose it could be extended to Wisconsin, but we'll keep it Northeast Wisconsin, Green Bay focused for now. We are not known as a startup and tech hub. So much so that I had experience in 2017 as an entrepreneur running my company that I'll never forget. Basically, there's a conference called the Rise of the Rest. And Rise of the Rest, and the billionaire Steve Case came to Green Bay, Wisconsin, at Lambeau Field as part of this Connector conference. We're talking October 2017, and I was volunteering at the time on this, just on the side, because running my company full time, but I saw this as an opportunity to really get connected in a different way, the ecosystem. Yeah. I was helping manage a startup pitch competition, and 8 startups got selected. 4 out of the 8 were from Green Bay. And I'll never forget meeting them because, keep in mind, I had been in the area at this point a year and a half running my own company, trying to raise venture, angel capital. And I never forget meeting them because I had never known they existed before that moment. Yeah. And neither of them had known the other existed before. And yet we were still basically a 5-mile radius away from one another. And that was that moment where I was like, this is so wrong. Honestly, if we're going to be successful, this is wrong and needs to be corrected. And it was moments like that, and also ones that I had in the past, that I thought, someone's got to do something about this. There's got to be something that needs to be done, except we're all running our own companies full-time, heads down. This is more like community-type work that's kind of a different flavor that yet nevertheless needed to be done. So I would have kind of these kind of things, interactions would happen, and just shows the need. And so, when this opportunity with the chamber came up to do essentially that, for lack of a better, word, it was an opportunity that just jumped at the chance because it just is really meaningful work.
Yeah. Well, you spent the time building your own company with your dad. You guys are green. Mm-hmm. You learned so much. You come to Green Bay. You're volunteering in the startup community, and you realize how fragmented things are, right? And you're saying things will never get built unless we integrate. Yep. And so it's that vision, like you shared, of capital, of connections, of customers, and coming up with a strategic plan and saying, how can we integrate all these things for those that are wanting to build just like we have, which is actually really cool because not only have you taken the time to build your own company, but now you're also helping to build, and I just think it's awesome. Man.
Yeah, it's a startup, but it's in a different way, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Cool. Great. Okay, so let's get into my favorite part of the podcast, right? And where we kind of really dig into something that not oftentimes people want to share about. Sometimes they do. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes they don't want to because sometimes the experiences can have been painful. But really, we want to hear more about mistakes you made or failures, that type of thing, so that our listeners who are aspiring to build something like you have or want to help others, they can pass that wisdom on or take it for themselves and apply it so they can go farther. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, who wants to do that, right? Yeah. We have a wheel that works. Like, let's not reinvent it, right?
Sure.
So passing on that wisdom. But first, let's start with this. You were successful in what you did. Not everyone is successful. So tell us, what did you do right?
What did I do right? So I'll answer the question related to under the kind of the umbrella of me running the startup, right?
Yeah.
What I did right was I was able to sell our story really, really well. So much so that when we go to different pitch competitions, when we pitch a demo day for the Startup Accelerator, I was just anecdotally, people share with me, "Wow, you're my favorite pitch. Like, you just you head and shoulders above everybody else." And so what I learned from that is power of story is paramount, especially in the early stages, because you're trying to paint that picture, paint that vision. Yeah. But also making sure that you're crafting the story around you as a founder, but also what you're looking to do. Yeah. There is a process to that, and that is one of the biggest things that I would say got us in front of the people that we got in front of, was because we were so good at telling that story.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, product matters, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't know how to talk about it or present it, or to whom you're presenting, who cares?
Yep.
Yeah, no one does, because they don't know about it, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Okay, so thinking back all the way from the beginning, all the way even to present day, give us one or two either mistakes or failures that you look back, painful learning lessons, things that if someone said, "Hey, I'm going to go do this," and you had already done that and it didn't work, you'd say, "Don't do that." Right?
Yep.
What'd you do wrong?
Yeah. So in my role, I have the opportunity to have conversations with startups who were basically like me 4 years ago, right? Having an idea with kind of maybe early vision of like what a product could look like. So I have a lot of these conversations where I sit down and basically explain my failure and say, this is why I'm saying what I'm saying. Don't do this. So what is that? So the biggest problem that we made with Upper Room Technology was that we did not scope the problem as well as we should have. So. And because we did not scope the problem as well as we should have, we ended up building a product that was one size fits all, but really it was one size fits none. Yeah. Because if you think about it, first of all, we have to start with the market and figure out what the market needs, and then build a product for that market. What we had inadvertently done was we'd actually talked to several markets. So community banks, small banks, large asset managers, small asset managers, and basically polled each one in what they wanted. So we had all these input from different people and different roles, and that negatively influenced what we actually built. So because of that, we ended up building a feature set that was fine, but not deep enough for any one individual market. Got it. So that was the biggest challenge, and to make it worse, that's not something that you can correct really very easily, because what we ended up doing was all of a sudden we had this product launched, and by the way, we had spent a year building a product. Literally January 1, 2017, we started coding. We started finished coding basically the last week of December 2017. Literally a year, 50 weeks of coding. And all of a sudden we set out into the market, and it was almost a question of like, well, who should we take our product to? And we quickly realized, again, being naive at this, we had it completely wrong. We should have started with a market first. Maybe we should have honed in on community banks. Maybe we should have honed in on small asset managers, and built a feature set for that specific market, and then work outwards from there. That is honestly something that I tell startups, and when they're saying like, oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, I said, you have to understand how much of what you just told me is based on assumptions of how you think somebody will buy from you, how you think somebody will act. Those assumptions need to be proved out, and there's a lot of detail to that, to what I'm talking about. But on a high level, I guess to maybe put a bow around it, I see people making big decisions based on assumptions, and that's that's basically what that eventually leads to is wasting a lot of time, which I did, and wasting a lot of money, which I also did. So that's not a good combination. No. So that's what I would say, kind of overarching.
You can always make more money, but you can't get the time back, right? Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So how would you talk about that? Would you say don't go so broad in your target market, or pick a smaller, more narrow niche to start, and then kind of land and expand from there?
Yep.
What would that caution be, or how would you talk about it, saying don't do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and this is not only just my experience, even getting into this, like, and even kind of being in my role looking back, I'm connecting a lot of dots. Peter Thiel says it really, really well. Peter Thiel, for those who don't know, in his book 0 to 1, he was an early investor in Facebook, billionaire or whatever. One of the things he said was, billionaire, because I know it's more than just 1 billion. Let's put it that way. He says every startup needs to start with a very, very small market. Yeah. So the goal of any startup initially needs to be, how do I become a big fish in a small pond? Yeah. Yeah. How do you make that pond, aka how do you make that market so narrow and defined that you can add value in a very, strategic way to that small pond and become the big fish, right? You saw, how does that look in practice? It looks like Facebook starting with only Harvard College, Harvard University students on their platform, then expanding to other colleges. And for a long time, they were just university students across the board, right? What they were doing was an incremental market, going from market to market, but they had started with a niche market of just Harvard students and then expanded other. And then eventually they opened up the inflection point change, they opened it up to everybody. Yeah. But that was when they had so much pent-up demand from everybody else that they opened up the floodgates, basically. Yeah. You see Amazon starting with books. Did they go to market with saying, we're the everything store, you can buy everything here? No. Because that is not a successful strategy. That would not have been successful. That's right. Yeah. So, and especially starting with such a bland category, books. Who cares about buying? College students, but generally speaking, it's not sexy. Yeah. But they dominated a non-sexy market where nobody was really focusing their attention.
And they still are.
And they're doing well.
And maybe Amazon is the one who made it sexy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, and it allows you to take a more iterative approach, right? Fail fast, fail hard, as they say. Whereas if you take all this time to try to develop this perfect product, and you have all these underlying assumptions that you think this is the problem for, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's not. Yep. Okay, where do you start? Rather than, hey, so let's just start with Harvard, right? Let's see how this goes here, and then we can expand from there. Well, what about other schools, right? You kind of, land and expand from there. Yep. It allows you to constantly be putting out different evolutions of that product to make it better, based off of real customer, real target market feedback. Yep. Which is really powerful. And then, because we could be way off in our initial speculations or vision long term. Yep. And getting that constant feedback from our market, the customers that are using the product, gives them a sense of ownership in it. Sure. And then allows us to know that we're actually more spot on with what the real problem actually is. Absolutely. That we're solving. Yeah, and the last thing I would say on this, there's three types of risk in a startup. Yeah. We've got market risk, technical risk, and scale risk. Market risk is basically, will people buy it? Technical is, can I do it? Technologically, and scale is, can I actually make one product and make it multiply it to 1,000 really quickly. Market risk in our world, most things can be done unless you're trying to launch rockets to Pluto, which or Mars. Let's just start with Mars. But honestly, in an early stage, most importantly, you have to answer that question: will people buy this thing? Yeah. And that's where that comes from, right? So. Proving it out in small markets enables you to do that. Awesome. So what you did right was you were really able to communicate your story well, tell your story well to investors, et cetera. Made sense, and it moved people, it inspired people, which is huge. I mean, if you can't talk about what you're doing, if you can't cast that vision and inspire folks, it's going to be really hard to sell them or have them buy into what you're doing.
Yep.
Get behind what you're doing. What you did wrong was you went too big, right? And instead of go big or go home, in this sense, you really want to go small. Otherwise, you will end up going home, right?
Sure.
So what you did wrong was too big too early. And so with that in mind, right and wrong, what would you do differently if you were to be sitting across the table? And in a sense, you do this on a regular basis. Someone at 18 years old, 20 years old, maybe they're 50 years old, but they're going to venture out. They're aspiring to build. They've got a good idea. They've got a vision.
Yep.
And you want to keep them from experiencing some of the same failure or pain from the failure that you experienced. How would you counsel them to go about doing it? What would you tell them to do differently? Or how would you, if you're going to start it over again and build a new business, how would you do it differently?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm going to say something a little bit different than my answer of what I didn't do well.
That's not acceptable.
I'm going to flavor it differently. What I'm going to say is, what I would do is making sure I identify the key assumptions.
Yeah.
And especially from a market risk perspective, what are the key assumptions that need to be true in order for this to happen, in order for this to succeed? And the number one assumption there is people will buy what I'm selling.
Yeah.
And because it's a huge difference between a startup with $0 of revenue and even $10 of revenue. It shows that there is a value exchange there. And what I would do is I would prove out the assumption. I would make sure we validate and vet the assumptions really, really well before we actually look to take it bigger to other markets. Again, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but it's like, will people buy what I'm selling? Is this the right problem? There's a lot of assumptions that need to be validated, and I would make sure that happens. I would also say the second thing I would do is there is a great value in building as startups starting as side projects. So, like, for example, if somebody has a full-time job and they're telling me, I want to raise capital so I can go full-time on my startup. I said, that's a terrible idea because there's so much risk in that decision. What I counsel people is to say, keep your full-time job, have that stability in your life, and develop out your startup as a side project, validating those assumptions as we talked about, and you need to kind of go down the path, kind of having that sidecar, getting it to a point where either you've got customers paying and there's that you can show that there is a market need for what you're doing, and that is going to help with two things. Number one, it's going to help investors have confidence and there's actually something here. But number two, more importantly, it's going to give you the confidence as a founder that this actually is something here. You're proving it to yourself that it's actually working.
Yeah.
And that's honestly what is necessary if you're actually going to go full-time on the startup. I would agree. A lot of, even I read about an article with the company Honey, right, that just got sold to PayPal for $4 billion. He had for several years, he had to take another job as a product manager at this company. He didn't want to do it, but they were in a place where it was still too nascent that he couldn't afford to stay in his company doing it full time. He had to kind of keep it as a side business for a decent amount of time. And that's something that I'm trying to tell companies that I interact with is like, you need to run that playbook, because that's the best way that I think to have success to not throw yourself to the wind.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I really love the idea on assumptions, and that would probably be a second thing on what not to do, right? Don't assume, and we know the old truism, assuming makes an ass out of you and me, type of thing. But it's true. And not that we don't bring presuppositions to the table, that's one thing, but we're wanting to test the hypothesis, not just assume that. well, we think this, that, and the other thing because we read this, that, and the other thing. Like, we actually need to get out there and really test it. On the second thing, I think it's interesting too, because it's like, it's the same with, I think, building wealth long term. If you're skimming off the top before the power of compounding interest can really take effect, it'll never compound. You'll never will have that atomic effect. And if a guy quits his job and goes in and is living off the capital that was invested, capital that could actually be going to other things within the company to help build it and eventually scale it, he's actually circumventing the process. Whereas if he had his product manager job or whatever he needed to do to have, he kept that, then whatever capital was invested into the startup can actually be used to help scale it more and more and more and more till it becomes its own machine and running, and then we can say, okay, now is the right time to transition. And I get it, because I could understand a guy wanting to go all in and that type of thing, but it really is a way to mitigate risk and ensure that you are being we're doing it well. So we're building the foundations of all work. Not that it can't fail, but we're setting ourselves up for the best possibility of it succeeding.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
I would say absolutely. And startups are basically a journey of high risk to low risk. So you need to make sure you manage as a founder the high risk portion really well, and that's the best way to know how to do that is by having a level of stability in your life and then developing out that startup on the side.
That's good. It requires patience.
Yeah, it does. It does require patience.
Especially,
we want it now. We want to success. We want to be an entrepreneur. We want to do that all now, but it's a slow step to get there. It's a journey, and I think maybe part of the problem is we need to know what that journey is. So and walk in it, right? And being willing to wait, which can be tough, especially if you're a visionary entrepreneur type. That can be really tough. It can be.
Which is probably why it's good to have a team around you that can help also speak that kind of wisdom into you, folks that have gone down the path before. Really how valuable your current role is to give guys kind of a check-in saying, hey, wait, keep your job. Don't, trust me on this. Let's really unleash the power of that capital into what you're building, really test the market so it's going to set you up for the best possibilities of success, not so you hop in and short-circuit the process altogether. So. Awesome, man. Well, this has been super helpful. So a few questions here that kind of fun at the end. I'm always curious. We don't grow up in isolation. We don't grow up in a vacuum. We're always being shaped. We're always being formed. Sometimes, in our day and age, with how accessible technology has made everything, we can have mentors that we actually never even meet, like a Warren Buffett, right? We ingest all of his stuff, we read all his stuff, we hang on his every word, and we might not ever meet him in our entire lives, but yet he's so influential to us. But I'm curious, who for you has been that source of mentorship or inspiration or formative? It could be someone that you know and know very well, or it could be someone, again, kind of afar that has been a source of indirect inspiration or mentor to you. So in this case, I would say there's many people that are coming to mind, but the one that's really been steadfast in my journey in life and professional life as well is my father. That's awesome.
So I learned a lot from him even before we had started business together. He's just one of the wisest individuals that I know, just very astute, helped me think about the world in different ways. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to do business with him, and it's something that really it wasn't even like it. It's not so. We didn't even really say. We didn't really say like, oh yeah, at some point we're going to go into business together. Just kind of a series of circumstances, just kind of made it happen and natural. And it was really, really neat. I learned so much about the business world from him. And honestly, we learned a lot of things together, a lot of new things together about the raising capital and proving out assumptions and things like that. So he would definitely be the individual that I would say, from a professional standpoint, but also a personal standpoint, it certainly impacted me the most.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and I think fathers inescapably impact, right? Whether they're present or not, or a good father or a bad father. I love hearing stories like yours where the father is a major source of inspiration and mentorship. I think we need more of it in our day and age.
Right.
So super refreshing to hear, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we often, ask for like, what's the best advice you've ever been given? I stole this question from Tim Ferriss. He's got an awesome podcast. But I'm curious, what is a piece of advice that's floating around popular in our day and age that you hear and just makes you cringe? Like, you might be sitting at a coffee shop and hear a couple next to you talking, whatever, and the guy says, "Oh, you should do this, that, and the other thing," and you're like, "No,"
Sure.
and you like want to reach over and intervene and all that kind of stuff. What is some of the worst advice that you've heard floating around today? Could be about anything. Could be startup world or whatever, but anything.
Yeah. So a lot of things are coming to mind. I would say the biggest one is that I questioned a lot when I was starting to be an entrepreneur is, do I have what it takes? To finish that sentence, for me particular, do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? So much so that I'm sure one of the highly Googled searches is traits of an entrepreneur, right? Probably Inc. and Fortune and Time has all these things to say about that. But the reality is that if we try to stereotype what an entrepreneur is, we're totally missing the boat, right? There are introverted. If you're talking about successful entrepreneurs, they're introverted, they're extroverted. They started from nothing. They started from everything. It really runs the gamut. There is no one persona to be an entrepreneur. I've also heard it say, like, "Oh, I can't be an entrepreneur because I don't take risks," and I think that they've got that wrong. What I would say is, entrepreneurs know how to take calculated risks. And they take calculated risks by validating the assumptions that need to be validated to give them the confidence to take that risk. That's the biggest misconception and the kind of worst piece of advice that I hear from people, either not understanding what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and whether or not they can even do it. And I hope that clarifies some of that probably prevailing knowledge or wisdom that's out there.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Yeah, we oftentimes want to put things in a box because it helps us maybe to understand things better. When really there isn't necessarily a box in that regard. And in another sense, we're always all taking risks. I mean, all of life is risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. All right, last but not least, you, my friend, get a billboard in every major city on the earth, right? Mm-hmm. Times Square, like you're front and center.
Yeah.
What message are you putting on that billboard? What do you want the world to see?
Right. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I would say, if I'm going to get a billboard that's seen by basically everyone on the earth, it can't be anything about me or anything about like what I think is true or whatever. I would say it has to be something from a higher power standpoint. And what I mean is, everybody in life has like a set of beliefs, set of values, right? Either we, from a spiritual sense, right? Either we believe in God, we don't believe in God, that kind of thing. In my case, in particular, right? Everything I do on a professional and personal journey, I guess. I really aim that it points to one thing, right? And that's really to make God, in my case, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, known in the world and in my role. And I that's really kind of the aim that undergirds everything that I do on a personal and professional level. So how that boils down to like a billboard, I would say, it's kind of hard to put like a statement on it, but I would say something about like, Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world, something to that effect, right? Because honestly, we kind of have to, it just at a higher level, take a step back and like, who even are we, right? I mean, like we're like, a human being that's like, 6 foot, tall, on this planet, and we only have a finite life, right? What is there more to this? And we all live by faith. My faith is based in the Bible, and the Bible says that there is life after death if we believe in Christ. And so that's what I would say ultimately is that I want to communicate, right? Even not maybe directly sometimes, but like that's kind of what drives everything that I do on a professional and personal level.
Yeah, that's awesome. Build your own business, build your own empire, build your own kingdom.
Yeah.
Get it all and lose your soul. What good is it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So, I mean, there's a lot of people waving their flags saying, look at me. And, you know, I would acknowledge I do a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, we don't want to build our own kingdom. We want to build, you know, a higher kingdom, right? Which is, I would say, what I express. So
it's awesome, man. Very cool. Well, this has been a blast. I loved it. And people either in Green Bay, Wisconsin area, Wisconsin, altogether, even around the country or the world, man, if they wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and that'd probably be the best source to do that. So Matthew Key, you'll find me there. I work for the Startup Hub, and connect with me there. I'd love to continue the conversation or chat with anybody that reaches out.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll put your contact info too, wherever you want out there in the show notes as well too, so people have tangible access.
Sounds good.
That's awesome. Very cool, Matthew. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Man, what a great episode with Matthew. Love that conversation. So let's recap. First of all, Matthew told us, don't go big. Don't go big. When you're starting out building a business, you need to carve out that niche, understand the market, know that there's demand, and go small, land, and then expand. Don't go big or you will go home. Secondly, don't assume. We know that it makes an ass out of you and me, right? So don't assume. Understand, test, A/B test, get it out there, draw out from the market what the need or what the demand is, and that what you are bringing to market is actually relevant, is actually needed, is actually wanted. Don't assume. Third, don't kill the cash flow. We can be tempted to want to burn the ships and go all in. Sometimes that's good, but more often than not, if we kill the cash flow, it's our lifeblood. And then we start skimming off the investment capital that could be reinvested back into the business to really get that flywheel effect going. Don't kill the cash flow. I want to thank you so much for listening. I hope that you are enjoying this as much as I am. And I want you to remember, this is really about you. This is really about folks that are coming along that have been in the trenches, but they've also had success, and they don't want you to reinvent the wheel. They want to help you go further, faster than they could. And so what a gift. What a gift that they're wanting to take their lessons, their failures, break them down and pass them on to you so you can learn from their mistakes. I hope that you're taking this away, taking notes, and passing it on even to others. With that said, if this has been helpful for you, please share it. Please share it with someone else that you know needs to hear these things or that could really benefit or would enjoy learning from these mistakes. A great way to do that is to give us a 5-star review. It'd be super helpful in getting the word out so other people can be learning as well. And I'm curious, who would you like to hear on the podcast? What failures from what person would you like me to dive into and break down? Let me know. Shoot me a note. You can hit me up at connect@startwithwntd.com. Again, connect@startwithwntd.com. Shoot me a note. Let me know what you like. Let me know who you want on the podcast. You can also hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. The handle is @startwithwntd. StartWithWNTD. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great. We'll see you next time.